Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Stephanie Griffin, and I'm the Executive Director of ACMP. And I'm really happy today to reconnect with an old friend who I haven't seen for a very long time, the violinist Harumi Rhodes. So I first met Harumi when she was quite young. I feel like you were still a teenager, actually.
Yep.
Um, Harumi is the daughter of my former teacher, Samuel Rhodes, who was in the longtime violist of the Juilliard String Quartet. And her mother is also a very famous chamber musician, Hiroko Yajima, of the Manis Trio and various other like really celebrated ensembles. Today is ACMP's inaugural Meet the Musician um, event. And I thought Harumi would be an excellent choice because she represents both someone who's grown up in that milieu and someone who's gone on to have a really important career herself. Harumi is the second violinist of a world famous quartet, the Takács Quartet. And before that, she had all sorts of other chamber music experiences that we're going to talk about. I'm going to start just with some questions for Harumi, and then we're going to leave time for all of you to ask your own questions and get to know Harumi. When it's time for that, just put your hand up if you know how to in Zoom or unmute yourself or put something in the chat, and you'll all have a chance to ask your own questions. So Harumi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes, and I want to just start actually just by asking you about your early years, like what it was like being the daughter of two like world famous chamber musicians.
Yeah. So it was a house full of music. My sister and I have an older sister. We would often wake up in the morning to the sound of our parents practicing. So to give you an example of a typical day as a child. My sister and I were in one bedroom together, as children. And my father would start practicing his scales around 5 a.m.
Oh, wow.
So, you
Don't
know,
tell me I don't do that.
so if there was any little part of you that might have thought, growing up in a household of chamber musicians was glamorous, let me tell you, um, no, I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, it's a lot of hard work. And so my sister and I grew up with being surrounded by a lot of beautiful music and also being very aware of the investment and the labor of love aspect of it. So I use that as an example just because that was very much part of our daily lives. Yeah, my mother played second violin in the Galimir String Quartet for over 20 years and was, as you mentioned, was also a member of the Manis Trio for many, many years. And my father played in the Juilliard Quartet. So um, a lot of the staples of the chamber music repertoire were things that my sister and I grew up with. So it was a wonderful childhood to have that, a huge privilege.
And how about, for example, like just being at home, like your social life at home? I guess you were like often hanging out with the likes of Felix Galimir and Robert Mann and
um, our home was actually pretty separate from that part of my parents' life. I mean, it's not that we didn't have people over the house, it's just that a lot of the musical activities were, you would travel out of the house for that. So my sister and I grew up in New Jersey, in a suburb of Manhattan, trees and grass. And my parents would go into Manhattan either every day or a few times a week, depending on what they were doing. And my father traveled quite a bit with the quartet, obviously. My mother was traveled less, but was also teaching a lot. And so I really think a lot of some of my love for teaching comes from both of them, but especially from growing up, spending a lot of time with my mother and seeing her investment in teaching the daily work with working with students, not only at a conservatory but also at a university. So, just kind of getting both sides of that from both of my parents.
Wow. Well, that leads me to my next related question was, so of course, two very busy chamber musicians with two children. Um, did you end up ever like going on tour with them or spending the summer, where they were at chamber music festivals or just being there when they were teaching, like did you end up sort of just being around their work a lot?
Yes, there were definitely some opportunities. A few things come to mind. One was, I think it was maybe when I was 8 or 9 years old.
Mhm.
Is that right? Or maybe I was a little older than that. Maybe I was 10. Um, I went with my dad on the beginning of a European tour. Um, and it was just like the most exciting thing to go travel and be with it. We were in Italy and get got to go on the I remember being on train trips and um, feeling very just feeling like I didn't blink the whole time, just being very, very excited. And I remember attending some of the concerts and some of the stage rehearsals. So like kind of being up close and personal in that way. Um, with my mother when I was older, like in my 20s, I went on tour with her. We were both playing in the Saito Kinen Orchestra
Oh,
in
wow.
Matsumoto, Japan, and we were stand partners in that.
Oh, wow.
And that was a really special time for me. I mean, just being able to spend that time with my mother, play side by side, and also to meet some of the friends that she had when she was in high school. So Saito Kinen Orchestra was a almost like a high school reunion for many Japanese artists who came through the Toho school and worked under either with or under Seiji Ozawa uh, at the time. So it was kind of like a class reunion for her, and I was able to join in on that and kind of get a window, kind of get a view of what she's like with her old classmates.
Oh, wow.
And also to see her in her, my mother's Japanese, to see her um, in the country that she grew up in. So there was something really special about that time. Um, my sister and I also spent some time sort of running around different summer festivals when my parents would go, whether it was Tanglewood or Marlborough, those two festivals they were at quite a bit. And so I remember my sister was a volunteer worker at Tanglewood. I don't know how many people have been there before, but volunteering like bringing people into the main gate or helping them find where they were going. And I at Marlborough, I remember working in the sort of in the dining hall cafeteria and helping set up chairs and putting out plates for meals and stuff like that. So we were those kids. We were the ones running around, and of course, music was a huge part of it, but it was a lot more than that. It was the community and the sort of just everyone being together and sharing space. Those memories are very strong in my mind.
That sounds wonderful. And I guess some of the other musicians had kids your age too, so there were people that you would see at these, were there, people that you got to know every summer through all those festivals, like kids your age, and
Sometimes, yeah, that's right. Sometimes, yeah.
that's great. So how did those so you're one of the people that know from the inside what it was like for your parents having this kind of lifestyle. Um, What, how did that affect, your decision to become a professional musician yourself? Was it something you always knew you wanted to do, or were there other careers you had in mind? What led you to actually decide to do what your parents were doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it wasn't so clear cut to me, what I wanted to do when I grew up, kind of thing, I always loved music. But I remember even as a child being completely in love with the instrument. and begging my parents to play. I started on piano actually,
Oh, wow.
and I started on piano when I was 5, and my sister played piano really beautifully, and she played all throughout high school, and so I started on piano too, but the piano just seemed really big and really scary, and my feet didn't touch the ground, and I couldn't reach, it just seemed huge and really frightening. And, my I think part of it was the fact that I couldn't grasp it wasn't something I could hold in my hand, if that makes
Mm,
sense. And I
yes.
wanted an instrument that felt like a friend. I wanted to take it with me, and I wanted to pack it up, and I wanted to feel like it was something I could really relate to. And so I begged my parents for the violin. And I remember my mom said, "Really? Can't you pick anything else?" I think she was a little bit, she was trying to have a little separation, trying to probably, I mean, now that I'm older, I realize that she was probably concerned that, there's just too much closeness. Like, couldn't you pick anything else? And I remember her saying that to me. And of
Oh,
course, me being the contrary little girl that made me want it even more. And I remember when I was about 7, it was second grade. My father said to my mother, I remember because it was in my presence, he said, maybe we should, Hiroko, maybe we should let her play the violin. She keeps asking about it. And she said, okay, but, let's make sure that she doesn't study with us and that we find another teacher. So I'm very thankful to my parents for that, because my parents kind of became um, helpers. Like, they were really like on my side, but they weren't my teachers, which I think was pretty healthy for us. And they were pretty hands off, I have to say. They were always supportive, but there were times, I remember when I was applying for college and trying to figure out, like, what exactly your question, like what I wanted to do for college and how that related to my career path. And, these are big decisions when you're 17, right? This is like the biggest decision you
yes.
have to make when you're 17 years old. And I remember my parents being, you know, bless their hearts, but they were super unhelpful. Like, they weren't really telling me what to do, which is in hindsight is very wise. But I think there was part of me that was like, hey guys, like, I'm your daughter. Could you tell me what you think? But I think they were really wanting me to. They wanted it to come from within, and they really wanted me to forge my own way. And I think they also believed that there were many possibilities, that it didn't have to just be one path. And My father is an example of that. My father didn't go the conservatory path. He went to Queens College, and then he went to Princeton. My mother has the exact opposite kind of situation, where she came on a Fulbright scholarship to the States from Japan and studied at Juilliard. So two different paths leading to a wonderful life in chamber music. Um, so it wasn't so clear cut to me exactly what the path would be. Um, but there were definite moments along the way, if that makes sense, that kind of helped shape how, my priorities and how I felt. One of them that comes to mind is the summers that I spent at Greenwood Music Camp. I don't know if you
Oh,
are
yes.
familiar
Yes.
with Greenwood. Greenwood was a huge influence on me. I went at the age of, I want to say, 12 and 13,
Mhm.
so tender age. And it was my first time away at sleepaway camp, and my first really intense chamber music experience. And I remember being terrified, but also really excited. Um, and speaking of moments, you were just asking about, like, was there a moment? I remember sitting at a master class at Greenwood when I was 12. It was a class that Joel Krasnick was giving, and it was a bunch of students my age and a little bit older. I wasn't playing, I was observing. And it was the first movement of the Schubert Cello Quintet. And it
Oh,
just made a huge impression on me. I mean, I remember going back to my room, my dorm room that night, and just being completely blown away, like totally transported. And I thought to myself, this is amazing. Like, I want to play this music and I want to be able to experience that. And everything that they talked about just seemed so relatable and so fun and special, and emotions that I had never felt before. And that's coming from someone who grew up with music around, I grew up with music all around me, but it was sort of being away from home where I experienced it so like straight to the heart. So I don't think I answered your question at all, but hopefully
It's
in a
interesting
roundabout way.
it's interesting that they gave you so much independence. So they're like the opposite of a tiger mom and tiger dad. They just sort of let you
Yeah,
um, and let you make your own decision and whatever. But on the other hand, I guess you also had access. Like
exactly.
if you had
Yeah.
a problem, and you needed help, you could ask. I don't know if you felt like you could, but like the ultimate Suzuki mom and dad lying in the lying in the wings, not necessarily Suzuki, but like people that know how to play it.
Right. No, I mean, I think I always felt, and I still do, I always feel like I have a wonderful relationship with my parents. I feel like they're very supportive and loving. They're almost opposite personalities from each other, so that also balanced things out a little bit. But but at the same time, there were definite moments especially in my teenage years and early 20s, where I was like, "Hey, mom and dad, remember me? I'm your daughter. Like, do you have any like thoughts on this?" Or you know, but better that way than being bombarded with a lot of aggressive parenting.
Oh,
So
I think so too. Yeah.
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 Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
that's really fascinating and actually probably took a lot of self-control on their part when you're practicing not to step in and be like, "Whoa, what are
Yeah.
you
I mean,
doing
I
in
think,
here?"
yeah, and I think it's interesting because, as I was getting older and finding my way and dealing with a lot of, questions that come up, like when you're trying to make decisions about freelancing or repertoire, you name it, when you're a little bit older. I think sort of the sentiment a little bit from my parents in their distinctly different personalities and in their different ways. If there was an issue, they'd be like, "Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, that's we're dealing with that too." So they weren't quick to judge, or they weren't quick to give me advice. They were just kind of like, "Yeah, that's the life." Like, they were a little bit like so sympathetic to the point where they were just kind of like giggling a little bit, like, "Yep, that's those are the questions, Harumi." So on one hand, it's like entirely unhelpful, and on the other hand, it's super helpful to know that you're not alone, and to know that you're not an outsider asking questions, trying to be part of the music world. You're inside it, asking the questions that need to be asked. So yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Yes, and it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and so that leads me to my next question was actually, before you ended up in the Takács Quartet, you did actually start your own group, the Cavatina Trio, um, a piano trio. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about, that experience, how you met your members of your trio, and what it was like for you starting your own group and building it from scratch and, navigating that aspect of your career.
yes. Yeah, that was a huge part of my life. The trio was together for, I want to say 10 and a half, 10 or 11 years, depending on how you count. And the three of us met at the Marlboro Music Festival, and we started it from scratch. I was just thinking about this the other day because I am someone who has started a group from scratch. I was also in the Lark Chamber Artists and for a
Hmm.
very short amount of time, and made the decision to leave that group. So I've started a group, I've left a group, and I've also joined the Takács Quartet. Joined a group that was established for many years that I didn't start or at all, and sort of hopped on in its life trajectory. So actually, it's very interesting when I think about it, because usually people have done one or two of those things, but it's rare that you've done all three at my age. So yeah, starting a group is it's it's really exciting because you make the rules. You know, you're not sort of joining an image or trying to like fit into something. It's like there's a lot, it's a, there's a tremendous amount of responsibility, but also liberation. Like you create your identity,
Yeah.
and especially when you're in your early 20s and you're um, you know, forging a path together, and you have time and energy and all of that. So yeah, we did it. We you know, we tried to, oops, sorry, I just dropped something, sorry. We tried to you know, we found management, we tried out for a competition, we, you know, we built our repertoire and um, tried to you know, we made a website, you know, the whole thing. So it was um, very exciting. We were close friends, and we spent tons of time together and worked very hard to overcome all of the initial obstacles of starting from scratch. And I think you mentioned the competition. The number competition was a big moment for us. I think working up to something like that can be extremely unifying for a group when you have a goal in mind, when you have concerts and goals, when you're not just talking about ideas, but you're actually doing them. So the ratio between rehearsal and the you know, fruition of what you're working on, when there's a good ratio of that. And so when we were working really hard towards concerts or really hard towards the competition, there was a real sense of unity towards that. One thing that I remember very distinctly that was very difficult for me, and I think probably for the group as a whole, is after you win a big competition, all of a sudden the group feels a little bit more in the hot seat, a little
Hmm.
bit more pressure. And I think I didn't expect that. I felt like, oh, the pressure is to win, right? Everyone thinks about like the amount of angst and pressure there is and competition there is to, you know, excel. But nobody ever talked to me about what it feels like when you do actually achieve something, when you do win first prize, and then how a group handles that pressure of maintaining that expectation. And that's something that I learned in that group that I never, nobody ever talked to me about, and I had to really sort of dig deep and find confidence to be able um, to move forward after that. So that's something that I always think is interesting. I've talked to students about that too, because I think that's something that people don't talk about very much.
Did it put, you know, like for, I've heard from some people, I've actually never done a major chamber music competition. I've heard from some people that the preparation can put major interpersonal pressure on a group. But are you saying that after you won, there was more of that than during the preparation?
I think that's how I felt. I think I'm not saying preparing is easy, but it was something that I was used to. I know that feeling of wanting something really badly and working really hard towards it and being disciplined and like all the things that you do in school to try to achieve your goals, and to, you know, you have mini goals and you work up to it and you really, you know, try to talk yourself up, and you become, you want to be prepared, and you want to feel unified, and all of these things that I, you know, had, even if I wasn't necessarily good at it, I had the training and some of the tools to do that. But the pressure that I felt was after we won.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
Did that have anything to do with the group eventually disbanding? Or, you know,
Well, that was much later.
mhm.
But I think, you know, the thing is that a lot of the groups that formed around the time that we did, and I think this is pretty common, would stay together for maybe 3 years and then break up. Or then there was sometimes like the 5 year mark where we made it through all of that. We made it through those humps, you know, through the graduation of school, through folks getting married, through folks having children. We made it through all of that. Um, but after a while, you know, I think we all started getting different jobs. Priscilla was is now the um, what's the I'm trying to always think what the terms are for cello, the associate principal cello of the Philadelphia Orchestra.
Mhm.
It's a fabulous job, and Yevis has a wonderful teaching job and is touring, playing with wonderful artists. And I moved out to Boulder, Colorado for a teaching job at the University of Colorado. So, you know, life, life
Yeah,
circumstances.
basically had to break up because you all end up going in different career directions. So
Yeah, and it's hard. It isn't just circumstance. I'd be lying if I said that. It's also just very hard to maintain a career that way. And we had a really wonderful time together, and it was a really and 10, 11 years was a good run.
yeah, that's an excellent run.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right that there is that period in people's lives when, like, if you haven't gone after a residency, for example, Trio Cavatina never got a university residency or maybe even didn't even want to try to get one. So if you're not going to do that, eventually someone's going to get a full-time job here and a full-time job there, and that, kind of defines it, I suppose, right?
It can, yeah, uh yeah, and also like I don't know of that many piano trio residencies.
It's probably not as many as string quartets, right? Yeah,
Maybe. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's excellent. So you mentioned now that you had done these three things, started a group. Let's move on to leaving a group.
Yeah.
Joining.
Yes.
So I now
Yeah.
just remembered that you had been in Lark,
Hmm.
and I didn't realize it was so short-lived. So how did that come about?
Oh, yes. So when I was in the trio, I was invited to audition for a group called the Lark Chamber Artists, which used to be the Lark Quartet. The Lark Quartet, for those of you who don't know, was a quartet that was together for 30 years, I think a long time, and had a wonderful, wonderful career. And but it had was changing identity into a group that wasn't just a quartet, that had guest artists and was focusing on world music and arrangements and commissions, new music and world music. And so I auditioned, for example, on music that included percussion and clarinet, and all kinds of different stuff. And I thought it would be a really nice, um, if I was lucky enough to get it, it would be a really nice addition to what I was doing in the trio, which was a fixed ensemble.
Hmm.
So when I auditioned, I learned all of this new music and had a wonderful time, and was lucky enough to be offered the position. And two things happened after I joined. The first was the membership changed. The cellist left maybe 3 weeks after I joined. I think that was probably already in the mix. So that was a surprise. And then the other thing was they decided that they really missed being a quartet and wanted
Oh,
to change back into a different ensemble. So at that point, there's a choice you have to make where you have to think to yourself what the timing is for this sort of thing. So for me, I thought to myself, well, either I would like to commit to this situation, which is not what I auditioned for at least 5 years. Because I think in my mind, that's basically when you join a group, you want to see a 5 year, we can't predict the future, but you want
yeah.
to make a commitment. It isn't just sort of like a once-off thing. It's a commitment to join an entity, a family, right, of sorts.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's very hard to find a member too. So if you left before 5 years, it would, be
right,
difficult.
exactly.
Yeah.
Or this would be my time to leave because it was sort of a window of time that I saw that either I'm signed up and I'm going to really commit, or I need to say this is lovely, but it's not at all what I signed up for. It's not exactly what I. And so I decided to leave because I was already part of a fixed ensemble. At that point, the trio was doing really well, and we were very, very committed to a certain kind of repertoire and a certain kind of commitment with a new manager and all this stuff. And so these were tough decisions, but I decided that it wasn't the mix that I thought it was going to be. It wasn't quite the foil for what I was doing. It would be actually in some ways very similar, the dates that we'd be offering, the kinds of presenters we'd be working with. And so I made the tough decision to leave. It's very hard to leave a group. People often talk about, oh, it must be so scary to join a group, or it must be so much responsibility to start a group. All of those things are true. I think one of the hardest things in my life was leaving a group. It's a
Oh,
very, very difficult thing,
yeah.
um, especially you know when when it's it's very difficult to feel like someone's leaving you, but it's also very difficult to leave. So again, that's something that no one ever really talked to me about, something that I wasn't emotionally prepared for, but something that I learned in my life.
And they were in, didn't they have a residency? Was it in Boston or where were they based? Or
Yeah, so they've had residencies. So there's been lots of different membership and lots of different residencies in different ways. Yes, outside of Boston, and also in New Jersey. So yeah, lots of different. The group has been very, very successful and has done wonderful things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So then on to so then you this happened before you got your job at University
Yes.
of Colorado at Boulder.
Yes.
Yes. And then so you finally end up moving to Boulder for a teaching job. So you had a little period where you were not in any specific group, right?
Well, when I moved, that's true. Yes. Yeah, in
Yeah.
2015 is when I moved to Boulder. Um, exactly. And I was there in a tenure track teaching job, a violin teaching job.
Yeah. And that was, I guess, is that how you end up meeting the members of the Takács Quartet?
That's right. So basically, my office was across the hall from the
Oh,
Takács
wonderful.
Quartet. I mean, the quartet has been in residence at CU Boulder for 40, 44 years or something like that. It depends on how you count, but many, many years. Um, and so, of course, I always, I knew the quartet was there, and that was a big part of the string area of the string department culture. There was having this wonderful quartet there in residence for such a long time. So that was exciting, joining that faculty, and I got to know some of the members also through the faculty series there. So every Tuesday night there's a faculty recital that happens, and a lot of people play chamber music and collaborate with different members of the faculty. And so I remember playing with, at the time, Jerry Walther was the violist of the Takács Quartet, and I played with her and Andras Feyer, both on several occasions on the faculty Tuesday series. And
Wow. So
then, mhm.
when it came to be that they were looking for a violinist, you'd actually already played with a few of them.
I
And
had played with them, as individuals in different non-string quartet type repertoire. I remember Jerry and I played a Schoenberg string trio together, and Andras and I played a couple piano trios together, um, and then my predecessor, Carolee Schranz, the original second violinist of the Takács Quartet, he was having a few minor surgeries, minor things, and they asked if I would sub in for a few concerts. So I think it was my second year on faculty. I played a couple concerts. So I remember playing with them at Ravinia, and also in Austin, Texas. And so I had, been on the road with them during those short periods of time when Carolee was out. So when Carolee retired, he retired when he was 70. They asked me if I would be interested in joining. So people ask me about my audition process. A lot of times there'll be an audition where you play, you're invited and you sit down and you play, and sometimes you get called back and play again, or you play a concert or whatever. And I joke around with people because I say, like, actually my audition process was over 3 years, because
Yeah.
when you're colleagues with somebody on faculty, and when you play all kinds of different repertoire, and sometimes you share students, either a violin student I shared with, Ed Dusenberry, or one that I shared um, through the DMA program, or you're co-teaching, or you're playing other repertoire and you see each other in the hallway, or you go on tour together, 2 years ago, and so you really get to know someone's character. So I joke around with people and I say, actually, my audition was 3 years long.
Well,
I mean,
that's the
that's
way it
not
should
true. It's not true at all, because they weren't looking for anyone. But on the other hand, that's in some ways it's true. So
And it makes more sense because they actually knew you from the, like, once you've toured with someone,
that's
you
true.
know
Yeah.
what they're like. That's a very, I mean, so before we open it up to questions from the audience, I just want to ask you a little bit about that because, for example, you were touring with them and they got to know you and they invited you to join. So wh what's it like? What is like being a member of such a busy quartet with a major touring schedule and a major teaching position. What's your day-to-day life now? I know you don't hear Sam Rhodes practicing scales at 5 in the morning, unless
That's
you
true.
do in your head.
Yeah. um, well, I think the first thing I want to say about that question is, you playing in a string quartet is not for everyone. You have to be. I mean, I'm joking when I say this, but, like, you have to be a little nuts, to want to set up shop with three other people who, your identity is completely combined, on, like, to the point where, yeah, you still have your name, right? You're still your person, but actually you're part of this collective noun. Like, a lot of
Yeah,
people won't know your name because you're just a member of the Takács Quartet. So on one hand, there's a lot of individuality, and on the other hand, you're really part of a collective, and that is the life right there. It's being really um, into the idea of constantly balancing this idea of the individual and the group. So that is, I could almost, like, say, everything that, I'll speak for myself, everything that I deal with in my daily life can be at least tracked back to one of those issues, and it's a beautiful issue to talk about. And as an inner voice playing second violin, it's even that much more pronounced. Balancing your individualism with this sense of community, this sense of collective, this idea of collaboration. And that's something I love, and something that I wouldn't trade for anything else. And so the life is what I want. This is like the life that I have always dreamed of musically. And so, in that sense, I love my role as second violin, and I love being in a string quartet, and discussing these things in the group, whether it's a musical decision, or just something, a very boring practical life decision in the quartet, or if it's teaching, talking to my students about how to lead and follow at the same time, and how to influence the music from the inside, and how to come to the fore and balance your sound, and how to blend and support, and how to do all of those things with your whole heart, without ever feeling like you're just following, or you're just leading, or you're just doing one thing or another. To be able to really love that and embrace it and feel like it's part of your personality. And so I feel like that life and that seat, specifically that role as second violin, is the place where I want to be.
Oh, wow. What a beautiful way to segue into our Q&A. That was very, very, very touching, beautiful thought, Harumi. So I want to see if anyone here has any questions for you about your life and your career and about being a second violinist or anything else that's come up. I saw one question in the chat. Okay, Anne. Hello, Anne. Anne Greg. Oh, yeah, Anne, do you want to ask your question?
Harumi, great to see you.
Great to see you.
I'm on my way to flag football, but I was just curious what you're loving to play these days and why.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you added these days because I was going to say it's very hard to choose from the whole repertoire, but I can talk about what we're playing now. Um, right now, so for example, yesterday I came from a rehearsal where we were working on a brand new piece that was just written for us by the wonderful Brazilian American composer Clarice Assad. And she wrote a new piece for us called Nexus. And I'm loving playing that right now. The premiere is going to be next week. And the idea of playing something that's fresh off the page, where there's, on one hand, no tradition, right? There's no legacy or tradition of, say, like a late Beethoven quartet, where there's, all of this tradition and so many recordings and um, so many different editions, but rather the excitement and the pressure, if you will, comes from um, creating this music and creating the first time that the audience is ever going to hear it, and the first time the composer is going to hear it. And we've been workshopping with her, but in a real live situation. And there's, as far as I'm concerned, there's really nothing that's quite as thrilling as that if this is your profession. So we're in the throes of that right now, and we're at the preparing that. The piece has some theatrical aspects to it, so not only are we playing, but we're also moving around, and we have small motions and some choreography involved as well. I mean, we're not like dancing up a storm or anything, but we are moving around and using movement and our placement to each other as part of the conversation with the music. So that's also very exciting because it's kind of changing the way the quartet moves and communicates. So that's, I would say, on the top of my list of favorite things that we're doing right now.
Wonderful. Do we have any other questions from, don't be shy. I know you've got lots of questions. Oh, Pamela. I see. Can
Me
you just,
unmute. Yeah.
there you are.
Hi. Hi,
Hi.
Harumi. Hi. It's wonderful. This has been so, I came a little late, but it's really lovely to hear you speak. And I, I'm old, as my kids say. So I also went to Greenwood probably before you did. But I went in 69, 70, 71, and was also a big fan of the Juilliard Quartet when your dad was playing. Well, I guess they were out there actually. Well, no, I wasn't. That wasn't Greenwood. That was Aspen, and I was out there when your dad was out there. So, but it's wonderful to hear and hear what you're saying. And I have a lot of questions, but one thing that just comes to mind because I heard what you were saying about how your parents were not pushing you, and um, it's in terms of what kind of space you've given them for in terms of music.
Yes, so you cut out there just for a second, and I heard most of it, but I didn't catch the question part.
So the question was what you have done with your own kids in terms of nurturing their music or pushing them, or um, I have had struggles in I mean, I'm been a violinist since I was young, but as somewhat for a while professional and now amateur, but and my kids did not take to it, and
Sure.
it's been very hard for me. Um,
Yes.
so I'm just curious.
Yes. So I don't have children, but I do have students. And so
Mhm.
this question comes up quite a bit. Obviously, parenting is very different from teaching. But I can speak to the idea of when to really lean in
Mhm.
and when to kind of know when to slow down, actually, and really kind of take stock and figure out where the student is and really meeting them where they're at and listening to their goals and trying to not just um, not just mentor students in the way that, I'm the mentor, so therefore I need to motivate them. I need to tell them what to do because I'm the boss and I know what's best and they need my guidance. So instead of that, to kind of take it a step back and to think, well, there's another kind of mentorship where instead of really actively trying to move things along and tell them they need to change and need to do this and need to do that and motivate, but to slow down and to really listen to where they are in that process of contemplating a change or contemplating a step forward. And I think that's something that I was thinking about this the other day, actually. I think this is something that in some ways I have internalized through things that my parents have maybe led by example. It's not that my parents didn't have things to say. And they both are very different personalities and had, even though they both had a life in chamber music, their experiences were actually quite different. Even just their heritage and the way they were brought up musically and their training. And so I think on one hand, it's very hard for me to sometimes back off and slow down when I'm trying to mentor or work with a student. But I also think that it can be the most eye-opening way to communicate with the younger generation. And it can also actually establish quite a bit of trust. And it can ironically move things forward a lot faster than perhaps a more direct path. And so that's something I think in some way or another, maybe I have learned from my parents, even though parenting and teaching are two very different things. I
know, but thank you for that. That's so interesting. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you. It was an excellent question. Do we have any other questions for Harumi? Aha, Keith.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Harumi, for your generosity and your openness and sharing. It's been a wonderful time to listen and hear your story. I'm wondering, I've always played second violin, and I sometimes say that I need oxygen when I go up third position. But do you ever feel a need to expand the range of possibilities? Second violin is quite limited in its technical demands, and particularly not many fugues, although we start many fugues. Another sub-question, do you have any techniques for perfecting difficult passages besides just playing things 10 times or, yeah, thank you.
So I think I got snippets of some of that question. I'm so sorry, you were a little bit in and out. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I heard was that in the second violin role, we're not, the star of the show all the time. So we're technically not always playing, the melody and all the crazy passage work stuff. And so am I right that your question was about how to keep the technique up to be able to deliver reliably on stage? Was that the question?
It was more not, what about feeling jealous or envious of, and not getting many tunes to play?
Oh, okay. Oh, I love this question. Okay. So I think that there are many violinists out there who associate maybe more with the first violin role because of all the things that you just said, like being jealous of playing the melody and being in the limelight and having all the cool stuff, right? But then there are people like me who really believe that I think my personality is really suited to being an inner voice. So I love the idea of motivating the music from within and being able to do it all, because we have to play tunes too. And the idea of being able to read the room musically and to be able to navigate between lines and to be able to support from within and to make everything shine around you. And to be able to, the second violin is the one who is often the glue in the quartet. We're the ones who keep it together. We're the ones who, along with the viola, we're the inner bits that make a rather nice melody sound extraordinary. Now, I'm sort of joking, but I'm also serious because I think it's, obviously the way these all work together. And I think there are lots of violinists out there who want to do both, and there are fabulous quartets out there where there's switching. I'm sure you can think of many groups that switch. We don't do that, and I'm very happy we don't, because I'll say it again, I love my role. I identify with it personality-wise. Also, I think joining the quartet a little bit later in my career, I wasn't in my 20s when I joined the Takács Quartet, and so I've been around the block. I've played, first violin, I've played second violin, I've played quite a bit. Well, I was saying I was playing in a piano trio where I'm the only violin. So I feel very fulfilled in many respects. And this is the place I want to be. I don't feel. I don't know if there was if there's a role I would rather be doing. So.
And about perfecting difficult passages, do you have any secrets?
Of perfecting difficult passages? Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with, I don't know if this ever happens to you, but in the second violin chair, oftentimes the technical stuff has to do with placing your sound. So, like in a really difficult passage, when I'm practicing it all by myself, I might have one kind of tempo or stroke or sound world for it, but then when I get in the quartet, it's either way too loud or way too soft. So I don't know if there are any other second violinists out there, but if you can relate to this, that the joke is you're either way too loud or way too soft, right? Like placing your sound is the most difficult thing. So I think for me, it's a little bit less in the second violin chair. It's a little bit less about being able to play the notes and a little bit more about how to place my sound. Because if I'm, tense and really trying to bang it out there, trying to get it out of the quartet, then the technique doesn't quite feel right. And if I'm just hiding, because a lot of second violinists just hide, right? We just hide. If you're just hiding, then again, the technique gets a little bit flabby and you don't hear that beautiful contribution of the inner voice. So I think that would be my answer, is really finding how to place your sound.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Keith. And we have a question from Yolanda. Yolanda, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm not going to go on video. You don't want to see where I am. I love hearing you talk about the second violin role in a quartet. My question has to do with seating. I just recently happened to hear the Miro String Quartet, and I was really struck by their seating. Apparently, for years, they sit, so going clockwise, it's first violin, cello, viola, second violin. And I found that really fascinating. It actually changed so much about the experience of hearing them play. And I'm sure it must be so different to perform like that. And I just wonder what your thoughts are on different seating arrangements.
Yes, so that's fascinating that you bring up the Miro Quartet. They're great, and I know them. They're all wonderful, wonderful folks, and they do sit, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but now the second violinist Will sits across from Daniel, so he's sort of in the viola chair, quote unquote, on the outside.
Exactly, and right. he was kind of playing out towards the audience at certain times, just like violas sometimes do, and it was really
Mhm.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And also
So,
you can see the viola and the second violin together,
yeah. So,
like on the right as you're looking at
yes.
the stage.
Yes. So that's a really cool, interesting idea, especially, there's only four people on stage, but there's so many beautiful combinations, right? So you can see that sort of um, dialogue, almost like a tennis match between the two violins. It brings out like a stereophonic way of hearing it, like a little bit more surround sound between the two violins. It also separates the voices a little bit, so it gives them a little bit more individuality. And it also makes for the inner voices to have a different kind of connection, a closeness, a literal closeness, which is very cool. And it's very interesting to talk about Will. Will is a friend of mine from, I know him from his Boston days. He is somebody who has sat second violin in a quartet, then went to first violin in a quartet for several years, and now is back to second violin in a different quartet. So he has literally played all the parts that the violin could play on all of these quartets. And so he's an interesting example of someone who clearly loves both roles, and in the second violin chair brings a wisdom to that part from literally from inside the music. And so there's something very cool about that. But to answer your question about seating, there's a whole history of tradition this way. A lot of European groups sit with the cellist on the outside and the inner voices in the middle. I went to Kneisel Hall Chamber Music Festival for 6 summers straight throughout my, in my 20s. And so the Kneisel Quartet is a big, I don't know if you guys know who the Kneisel Quartet is, but if you Google them and you look at a picture, you'll see that the cellist sits next to the first violinist. And so there's all these different ways of bringing out the voicing and the different kinds of dialogue that come through. And it's just infinite. And also, I have to say, there's a practical element of it too. Some instruments project very well from the back. Like the back part of the instrument can be very vibrant, and so sometimes when violas sit out on the outside, it can actually be very vibrant. And some instruments really don't. And so I think sometimes that's also a factor in how you sit and where the balance comes out. In my quartet, in the Takács Quartet, Andras has done both in the past from his European tradition, but also prefers now to sit in the middle. He feels like the bass line really grounds the quartet sonically, and also even practical things like intonation. We can really base our sound off of his in the central position. So every quartet's different, but brings out this different dialogue, which is fascinating. I'm so glad you asked that question.
Thank you. And it looks like we have one more question, and we're kind of at time, but this is an interesting one. Dr. Deborah Hazel Johnson, would you like to ask your question? Deborah, are you there? Well, she's on mute, but in the chat, she has this question. I don't know if Deborah is a psychologist or a psychiatrist. She's asking about, is there a connection of birth order and family of origin to feeling more comfortable as a first or second violin?
Oh, wow, that's a great question.
I've not thought
I
about it
have
that way.
I have no idea, but I bet, actually, just thinking about it off the top of my head, I bet that would be a fascinating study, actually, because as I was saying earlier, string quartet life is not for everyone, right? You have to be a very specific kind of personality that would want to make that your life. Um, and even more specifically, the idea of being an inner voice. Who really embraces that as something that they relate to and love, and that sense of responsibility of being a second violin? That's something that kind of responsibility that I look forward to. Whereas there would be someone else who would just be thinking about, like, well, when am I going to be able to play first? So that it takes all types to tango, right? Like all these types of people to make the world go round. And so that question is fascinating. And I bet I really hope there's someone out there who has or will do that case study.
Me too. I'm a second child, and I've been a violist since I was 10. So, yeah. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. It looks like we don't have any more questions. If I've missed any, please chime in. I don't see anything in the chat. I don't see any But anyway, thank you so much, Harumi. That was really fascinating. And I hope that all of you will actually, I mean, Harumi has a very busy touring schedule. I already saw two of you in the chat saying that you're coming to her concerts um, in Los Angeles and Maryland. So if you haven't had a chance to hear Harumi in the Takács Quartet live, just please look up their schedule, book some tickets, tell all your friends, and come backstage and introduce yourselves and ask that pressing question that you didn't ask today.
Yeah, please, if you come to a concert, please say hello. It'd be wonderful to meet any or all of you in person.
Yes, and thank you, Harumi. It was wonderful seeing you again, and we really appreciate your time talking with us today. We have one more comment. Oh, thank you, Harumi.
Oh,
From
thank you.
Wow.
Thank you all so much. It's been a real pleasure. Really just enjoyed so much having this opportunity.
Okay, so enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will be posting this video soon, and I hope to see you again soon and hear you soon again in concert, Harumi.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.